into our next session. I think it's common knowledge when you're bang smack in the middle of something, you lose out on the advantages of getting a bird's eye view or a bird's eye perspective, which is exactly what our next speaker, Brian Unruh, the Executive Vice President, International Operations Endurance International Group, is here today to give us. He's here to give us an outsider's perspective on the Indian web presence ecosystem and to share some strategies with you, some best practices that markets in other parts of the world have experienced that you can perhaps inculcate into your business over here. So a bit about Brian. As I mentioned, he leads the Endurance International operation and began his career as a CPA at what is now known as Ernst & Young. So, since joining Endurance in 2011, he has helped transform the company from being a domain reseller to a leading domain name registrar. So, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together to welcome Brian to the stage.
Hello. You hear me back there okay? I brought these up just in case. I'm younger than Sridhar, but I might need these here in a little bit. So anyways, thank you. I'm happy to be here today. But what I have to do is, this is the next slide. I think the clicker's not working. So I have to apologize in advance for the content of this presentation. I've had the opportunity to be traveling to Mumbai the last 3 years. And as you can see, when Sridhar asked me to speak about the most interesting markets in the world, I was really excited. So I came prepared today to talk about the historical Crawford market down in South Mumbai. I forgot it was web presence. Okay, making sure you guys are awake. All right, so I'm really excited to talk to you about some of my perspective from North America, but then also an outsider's view of what has and hasn't worked as the market's matured in the US. There's some very interesting similarities of where India is as a market that may be helpful as you look at your businesses and as you look at your customers and how we can work together to build some credibility around the value of the internet and how a website can help you. One thing that, from various perspectives, India is growing fast, but is it growing fast enough? Maybe from some of your perspectives, it could be growing faster. So some things today maybe can stimulate some ideas around how we can move the internet understanding forward and actually connect the end users with, let's say, the small, medium businesses and how we can connect them. One thing that, from a traditional market, when you look at the United States, there is a life cycle. And as Sridhar mentioned earlier and some other presenters, there's a segment that just hasn't happened in, let's say, these emerging markets like India or China or other locations. In the US, we got very grounded on a domain name, we got desktop, but the advent of technology, I think, has really helped markets like India and China because it's advanced at such an accelerated rate that the value of apps, as far as social networking goes, I think as we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of effort going into translation, trying to make the internet accessible to more. Governments are starting to invest more in infrastructure. I think, this is the age, really, when you look at the opportunity, how we can come together and really make a difference. So let's kind of make some high-level comparisons, I think, that would ground from a U.S. perspective and then also from an India perspective. So the U.S. web presence market, right now there's roughly about 280 million internet users. That's 75 million less than what's projected to be in the Indian market right now. Also, the number of websites, a little over 31 million. In India, as you'll see in a minute, that's 0.5% of active websites in India today compared to the US. Likewise, domain names, 79 million roughly domain names registered in the United States, whereas here in India, it's about 1/3 of 1%, as we'll see. But one thing that's interesting, as the circle demonstrates, there's a lot of understanding about the value of a website and how content's important, how it connects then to the end user and or the customer base. We'll touch on that here in a little bit. So some of the observations. One thing about in the North America market, you have a lot of do-it-yourself tools. plus the emergence of web professionals, how they've come together and really have connected the technology with the usability at either the business level or at the end user level. Also, there's about 60% of the small, medium businesses, they actually have a website designed by web professionals. So again, the internet penetrations happen and the value of the website's understood at a higher level. One thing is in a highly mature market, there's a fairly robust renewal of domain names, as you've heard from Crystal and you'll hear from others as far as the usability of a domain name and how that can really create value for your business from a moniker standpoint. So that can connect into your SEM, SEO strategy. Also, there's some really established players in the United States. They will remain nameless, but that's also helped in the education of the value of a website through their marketing efforts. And then lastly, in the US, because it's such a mature market, there's single-digit domain growth or website growth. And so in that, there's a little more competitiveness. And so as we look out on the global emerging markets, I think that's where we've been able to come together and share some of these best practices that could help, let's say, in the Indian market. So as I said earlier, the Indian web presence market right now, there's about 354 million internet users. As I said, that's 75 million more people online in India than the United States. So it's very interesting compared to think about. You have more of an addressable market, but it's only roughly about 28% of the population, so you can understand the growth. Likewise, the active websites, 1.2 million is the estimate. So we spoke earlier about the different tools and what we can build as far as getting businesses online. And the number of domain names, it's roughly only about 2.3, a little over 2 million, whereas that's just 0.75% or 1/4 of 1% of the totality that we have in the United States. So you can understand with the magnitude of difference between what the US market and the Indian market is. So largely, as we spoke earlier, I think it's do it for me. I think the market here in India provides an opportunity to say how we can help the customer get online, where you guys come in. Also, web professionals, the limited amount of them have this ability to, let's say that it's a broader or more greenfield opportunity to do some marketing efforts, as I'll touch on here in a minute. And about a little over 90% of the websites in India, they are designed by web professionals. So you can understand whereas 60% in the US, there's 95% here in India. We've noticed also on the domain renewal rates, they're not as robust. I think the market is trying to understand the value of a domain name still. I think, the advent of the .com and now the CCTLD and then now the NTLDs, what does it all mean? And I think that's confused the marketplace to some extent. One thing, too, there's several established players in India that I think there's growing consolidation. So I think that there is an advent of education that's happening that's starting through advertising, word of mouth, other events such as this. But it's high growth. When you look at the different markets, India is around mid 20% year-over-year growth. But sitting in your seat, you got to wonder, can it grow faster? So picture's worth 1,000 words. So I think what this shows you is what verbally I just said is the green line going straight up. That's the year-over-year increase in internet participation or penetration, where individuals are getting online, businesses are getting online. You can see that trend growing, which is opportunistic for us. Likewise, on the bottom, the red trend is really as far as access to the internet. As we heard earlier, the kickoff from Simran from ICANN, talking about the government investing in the accessibility, because there's one thing that we take for granted in North America is access to Wi-Fi, access to the internet. I think here it's becoming more and more prevalent that communities, cities, and others are connected more and more to the World Wide Web. So by that comparison, we've looked at the internet comparability. If you look at the customer type, I think that's really important too. Here in the customer type in the US, compounded annual growth rate. So if you take a 3-year look today and then 3 years from here, it's roughly predicted about a 3% CAGR when you look at where the market or that business can grow. Likewise, if you look at, we are on a subscriber basis, so we provide services for a period of time. So on a subscription, we look at average revenue per subscriber, and that's about $135 a year. Also, when you look at, there's about 4.1, a little over 4 products per customer. That means the customer is trying to grow online, so it needs security. They need other aspects of, let's say, a shopping cart. They need other tools to be successful online. If you compare that to India, so right now we're seeing almost 20%, so 17% 3-year growth compared to 3% in the US. That's a big difference, and that you're sitting in that market opportunity. Likewise, we are seeing about a $50 average revenue per subscriber. So that says something about the market. I think businesses are being much more frugal around what the return on that investment is, and we'll touch on that here in a minute. And I think a comment earlier was made as far as price sensitivity. And then we've seen about 1.8 products per customer. So why is that? We had a brainstorming session with Sridhar about what all the different products. To us, it's we understand the value of those products. Right now, to the customer, for the small, medium businesses, they don't see that value yet. And it's how to bring them online and understand the value of what that can do to their business. So really, when you look at that layer, so the SMB website owners, they have a lesser affinity toward technology. I think we mentioned earlier there was this, how do you bridge that gap to understand, they see the internet as being this complicated, what can it do for me? But one thing, they're focused on the return on investment. So we made a comment about, well, if they have so much to spend, how can they spend it the most way to grow their business? Is it in technology? Do they see the value of the website and what, in the future, what that can bring as far as search and customers finding their, let's say, local business, or maybe it's a regional business, could be national, could be international, depending on what they're doing. So it's really important to understand the type of business that they have and seeing that value. Let's say it's a travel agency. How do they attract customers to come to their website to then see and then do tours within India? So it's interesting as far as where they're focused to, should I put money in brochures, or should I invest in an online web presence to attract more customers? And lastly, they're very averse to change. One thing I say is the only thing that likes change is a baby. That's where that is human nature. Change is hard, and I think understanding and changing their way of how they interact with the customer is challenging. So we've talked about the business layer. Let's go down and understand the internet users. So it's very interesting what we see between the two markets. If you look at the United States, you see about 50% of users are under the age of 45. Whereas you look at India, and I think Sridhar touched on this earlier, almost 75% are under the age of 45. So you have a very large populace that are change agents. They're coming online, they're seeing the value. So I think the demographics are showing you a trend, an addressable trend. I think earlier we're talking about verticals. We heard about age. Age is really important too, because I think the younger the target group, the more likely they're online and they understand the value of, hey, I'm going to go search and I'm going to find where I want to go, and then I'm going to go. So they're actually becoming more aware of businesses that are online. So first adopters. So we talk about that a lot. We talk about, funny enough, in the US, we talk about late adopters. Here we're talking about early adopters. Early adopters are what really is pushing the need. So when you think of the layer of internet users, are actually pushing for the need to have more and more businesses online. So on the various players, so we've spoken about one. When you look at the internet users, I think they're going to be a significant portion of what's going to be driving change. They're going to be driving change for businesses to get online in India. Likewise, the SMBs will be forced to adopt this. I think they're going to see their competition, and or through outreach, we're going to be educating them more and more about how they can be successful online. And the web presence product companies, it's interesting because traditional products, when we refer to hosting, is changing. I think when we look at what's out there, web presence, how do I get my business online? In the early markets, let's say in the US or others, in the early, we complicated things. We talk very technical. Whereas today I find the the young crowd that's getting online, they're really speaking in very operative words like getting my site online. How do I sell online? We talk about e-commerce. They're just talking about selling product. And so they're very practical in their vernacular of how they want to, what services they need. We used to talk about SSLs, secure socket layer. Today they just talk about security. How do I make sure my website's secure for my customers? It's all of how we interpret and then communicate the complexity of the web. Also, the service companies. I think service companies are distinguishing themselves because they're adding a valued service in these emerging markets of understanding. I think what we take for granted is that why don't you understand why you want to get your business online? Well, I think we heard earlier that we have to explain so many details to the SMBs to get them online. How do you communicate that value? And I think that's one thing web presence companies are distinguishing themselves today, is they're taking that time to educate the customer or the businesses of the value to being online because the addressable market is searching for them online. So one thing about Endurance, we do have a lot of experience. I think we have a lot of experience that we have gathered from various aspects, not only from North America, but also around the world. And I'd like just to take a quick look at some things that we've done that may be helpful and as you start thinking through some of the items that you would want to do to grow your business. So guerrilla marketing. I think we've heard in the past, Sridhar has done a really good job about looking at the various aspects of, I think one was growth hacking and others. At various levels of business, some micro businesses, some very successful businesses, there's an aspect of guerrilla marketing that I think applies to all of us. And I think that's more around the innovation side, is understanding where your business is and how you can potentially make it more addressable to an open market with, let's say, innovative type positioning. And I think that's where the differentiated, knowing your customer. If you know your customer or your target market, that's probably the most critical thing we did early this morning is what is your addressable market? If you know your customer, you can really actually create some very creative guerrilla marketing tactics. And Sridhar's touched on this before, but it's so true. It's something as simple as know your customer. When you know your customer, you know where the call to action could be. It could be at the club where, if you think the target market's a younger crowd. Health club, people are, more concerned about their health today. Maybe that's an opportunity to introduce some services and or where you can gain more customers is when they're thinking on their non-work hours about, well, how can I grow my business? And that's another item. Strong affiliate network. I think one of our successes has been web influencers. And I think in India, you find more and more professionals becoming those influencers and educating the market about, well, this is where I would go, this is what I would do based on either your segment or the addressable market that they're speaking about. And then lastly, we've really had to make sure every dollar means something. And so we have to have some really astute investment in marketing. Branding. People say, why don't you do more branding? We rather invest marketing dollars educating the customer or the small business than, let's say, advertising our name. I know it goes, but it's connectivity of value is that, and all of us know that you have a limited set of dollars and you want to maximize the use of those dollars. But more importantly, we spend all this time acquiring customers. I think sometimes we forget to shut the back door. How do we retain those customers? There's nothing more rewarding than when a customer renews their services with you. That's an affirmation that you're doing your job well and how you can do better. So we've actually spent a lot of time creating what we call effortless experience, where we're really trying to create a way for the customer to be online with ease. So simplification of the product use, renewal of the services, different payment gateways, things that will always allows them to focus on their business and not on understanding the complexity of DNS records or managing their MX records or what do you mean? Why do I have to make a phone call to renew my services? Thinking through. I think there was a really good idea earlier about the IVR aspect, or how do we can create white label customer support so there actually is a connectivity of value to that customer, making them feel valued. So I know those are some very macro items. Some may not work, some may. But what I want to do is just one key idea is the micro affiliate model. I think we've touched on this in some conferences in the past, but it's really true. There's nothing more powerful than word of mouth. We can spend a lot of money on pay-per-click, SEO, SEM, content writing, a lot of the aspects of how do you create your website online and differentiate it amongst the competitors. But I think what's key here is you already have a set of valued customers. How about incenting them to then spread the word for you? And you can do, as far as with the price sensitivity of the market today, they'll feel very rewarded that they get something back for actually saying something they already believe in. They believe in your business, they believe in your services. Incent them to actually go out, and it's real good use of marketing dollars to make a customer happy and have them do your marketing for you. So what I would kind of in the referral commission area, one thing that's very valuable about that is when someone speaks from their heart, it's really it's very true. You drive along and you see billboards, you see advertisements. More and more, we're getting messages get delivered to us. But when a friend or family member actually tells you about, hey, go online, this is the services I use, there's nothing more valuable. Money can't buy that, but you can incent an existing customer of yours to actually spread the word for you. And one thing that does is it maximizes your return, and you can actually, you'll find, funny enough, that you'll have more dollars available to grow your business. One thing about too is you can't forget the customer, the existing customers. Prompt customer service is very important. I think sometimes we focus on the acquisition side and we forget about the retention side. So a balanced support is really important. Listening to your customers, addressing their needs, but actually servicing them on a very prompt basis is what really, at the end of the day, supports that word of mouth. So one thing with that, what I hope is in some of these areas that it makes you reflect on you right now are in a position of growth within India that is going to year over year continue to grow. And you're in a very, very good position to take advantage of that. Hopefully some of my perspectives gives you some ideas and maybe how you could change some of your marketing tactics. I think it takes all of us, both the users, the small, medium businesses, and us as service providers, to actually educate the market. I think it's happening. You can feel it. It's exciting. But I know our success is something that can be measured in happy customers. So with that, I'll open it up for questions. Oh, lunch. Yes. Need a microphone.
How long do you think it would take to become from a domain reseller to a registrar?
What's that again? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
How long does it take to become a domain reseller to a registrar directly?
How long does it take?
A domain reseller. In size of quantity or the numbers of domains that he has to own.
What's that? Right, so a domain reseller to registrar. That's a really good question. So we can measure that in time, or you can measure that in money. So I think from the standpoint of going from a reseller to a registrar would be more about volume. It would be more about the compliance cost of then actually connecting in and being a registered registrar with ICANN, being part of the stakeholder group. So time really, it's application-wise, I think that's something that when you find Simran here, Simran as far as application process goes. So there's an application process, but then from a business perspective, I think where you look at valuing that is, do you want to focus on your business or do you want to focus on the platform? And I think one of the values that we have to make versus buy. So from a time perspective, you can make a financial decision, but then really where do you want to invest your time? And I think that's what the value of having access to a platform, a domain platform, can then have you focus on the business side and the go-to-market strategies. But it varies. So as far as timeline goes, becoming a registrar can be both from a volume perspective and also an application process. Hopefully that answers your question.
Any other questions?
Great.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you again. Appreciate the time.